We've all imagined what it would be like to survive a zombie apocalypse. And you know what? It's just such an interesting topic to think about and talk about. So I've decided to list everything people get wrong about zombie apocalypses, starting with one people overlook: water. Everyone says stock up on food first, but that's backwards thinking that'll kill you fast. Emergency planners put water at the absolute top because you'll die from dehydration in 3 days, while you can survive weeks without food. The real problem? People think any water source will work if you're desperate enough. Wrong. After disasters, authorities warn against using tap water, well water, or any natural source without proper treatment because contaminated water spreads disease faster than zombies spread bites. You need 1 gallon per person per day, and that's before cooking, cleaning wounds, or washing anything. Most people's water plan is grabbing a few bottles from the kitchen, which buys maybe 24 hours if you're lucky. But here's where it gets worse. If your tap water becomes unsafe, boiling is the gold standard. Bring water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute before using it for drinking or food prep. Sounds simple, right? Except boiling water requires fuel and takes time you might not have when zombies are pounding on your door. But fuel is a lot more tricky than you think. Generators and carbon monoxide. You've barricaded yourself in a house, got a generator running in the basement for power, and you're cooking a victory meal on an electric stove. Hooray, you're cooked, dude. Carbon monoxide poisoning kills hundreds every year, especially right after disasters when people fire up generators indoors. It's called the silent killer because you can't see it, smell it, or taste it, and the symptoms: headache, dizziness, nausea, feel like stress or fatigue until you're unconscious. And generators aren't just loud, zombie-attracting noisemakers, they're totally death traps if you use them wrong. A review of disaster-related carbon monoxide deaths found that most happened because people ran generators inside their homes, garages, or too close to windows and doors. Even outdoor generators can kill you if exhaust drifts back into your shelter. The CDC guidelines are crystal clear. Generators must be at least 20 feet from any building, never in basements, garages, or enclosed spaces, and never near windows, doors, or vents. But when zombies are roaming outside and you need power for lights, radios, or medical equipment, how many people are really going to risk setting up a noisy generator 20 feet away in the open? Most zombie fiction treats generators like magic boxes that solve all power problems, but unfortunately they're far from it. Okay, but let's say you have got your power safely, but how do you keep it running when fuel is locked underground? Gas stations and fuel. Here's a fun fact that'll ruin every zombie road trip fantasy. Most gas stations can't pump fuel without electricity. Those pumps aren't hand-cranked, they're electric, tied to the grid, and useless the moment power goes out. Some stations have backup generators, but they're not designed for extended outages. They're meant to keep things running for a few hours during brief power failures, not for weeks or months of infrastructure collapse. Once that backup power dies, those underground fuel tanks become inaccessible treasure chests that might as well be on the moon. But even if you find working pumps, there's a bigger problem nobody talks about. Gasoline expires. Regular unleaded starts breaking down chemically after 3 to 6 months, becoming watery, ineffective, and potentially engine damaging. Ethanol-blended fuel degrades even faster because ethanol absorbs moisture from the air, turning your precious gas into engine-killing sludge. Diesel lasts longer, 6-12 months typically, up to 2 years with proper storage and stabilizers, but eventually becomes useless too. This means every abandoned car, every jerry can in someone's garage, every fuel tank you're planning to siphon from becomes a countdown timer. Find fuel early, or it's worthless. Empty tanks are a problem. Empty morals are worse. Are you ready to face the crowds before the corpses? Grocery stores. Everyone's first instinct: head to the grocery store and load up. The problem is, so is everyone else's. And grocery stores are designed to fail fast during emergencies. Modern grocery stores operate on just-in-time inventory systems, meaning they only stock 3 to 4 days worth of products under normal conditions. They're not warehouses. They're efficient distribution points that depend on constant truck deliveries to stay stocked. When panic buying starts, and it always starts before the zombies even show up, shelves empty in hours, not days. Remember toilet paper during COVID? That was with supply chains still mostly functional. Now imagine the same panic buying with 0 truck deliveries, no restocking, and actual undead creatures making deliveries impossible. But here's the part everyone misses. It's not just about grabbing food before it's gone. Those same stores become death traps once panic sets in. In 2008, a 270-pound Walmart worker was trampled to death by shoppers during Black Friday sales. These were people hunting for discounted TVs, not fighting for survival supplies. Imagine that crowd energy when people think they're shopping for their lives. The real problem isn't finding food. It's competing with thousands of panicked humans who got there first and won't share nicely. Smart survivors skip the obvious targets and think smaller. Pharmacies, gas station convenience stores, office break rooms, school cafeterias, places where other people aren't looking, but where you can still find enough supplies to buy time. You avoided the mobs, but what if your bullets bring more problems which you can never imagine? Noise and stealth. Movies love dramatic gunfights where heroes mow down zombie hordes with automatic weapons. Cool to watch, deadly in reality. Firearms are loud, really loud. A typical gunshot produces sound levels between 140 and 190 decibels. To put that in perspective, immediate hearing damage starts at around 140 dB, and sounds above 85 dB can cause permanent hearing loss with prolonged exposure. Every shot you fire is potentially advertising your location to every zombie and hostile survivor within miles. But it's worse than just attracting attention. In a world without background noise from traffic, air conditioners, and city life, sound carries much farther than you'd expect. That zombie-clearing gunshot might be heard clearly from several miles away, especially at night when cooler air carries sound more efficiently. Here's what people don't consider. Even quiet activities become loud in the post-apocalyptic silence. Starting a car engine, running a generator, chopping wood, even talking at normal volumes can travel surprising distances when there's no ambient noise to mask them. The stealth problem gets worse indoors. Most residential construction uses thin drywall and hollow doors that transmit sound easily. Your whisper about who takes the next watch might be loud enough to draw the dead. Professional military and law enforcement train for noise discipline because sound kills more operators than enemy bullets. But most civilian zombie plans involve making enough noise to wake the dead, literally counterproductive to survival. You think gunshots clear the room? What if that blast brings every zombie in a mile crashing your door? Medical emergencies. Everyone focuses on zombie bites as the main health threat, but reality check. You're way more likely to die from appendicitis, infections, or basic injuries than from turning into a zombie. Approximately 1 in 20 people develop appendicitis during their lifetime. It requires immediate surgical intervention, appendectomy, or the infected appendix bursts, causing peritonitis and often death within days. In a zombie apocalypse, that's a death sentence, unless your group includes a trained surgeon with proper equipment, anesthesia, and sterile conditions. But appendicitis is just one example. What about diabetics who need insulin? Heart patients requiring daily medication? People with high blood pressure, asthma, epilepsy, or any chronic condition that requires pharmaceuticals? Modern medicine keeps millions alive who would die quickly without access to their medications. Even minor injuries become major threats without proper care. A simple cut becomes life-threatening if it gets infected and you don't have antibiotics. A broken bone that heals wrong can disable you permanently. Dental problems, abscessed teeth, impacted wisdom teeth, untreated cavities can kill you through systemic infection. Emergency wound care after disasters emphasizes cleaning wounds immediately with clean water, applying antibiotic ointment if available, and covering with clean bandages. But clean water is already a premium resource. Antibiotic ointment expires, and bandages assume a sterile supply. You can splint a bone, but you can't splint a burning stairwell. Can you? Fire hazards. Here's a scenario nobody talks about. You're safe in your barricaded building, zombies can't get in, supplies hold out, and then someone accidentally starts a fire. Game over. Modern home fires reach flashover. Everything in a room ignites in less than 5 minutes, compared to about 30 minutes in older homes. Synthetic materials fuel rapid spread. In normal times, fire departments respond in about 4 to 6 minutes. Zombie times? You're on your own. No 911, no fire trucks, no firefighters. Once fire starts, you have minutes to put it out or evacuate, abandoning your secure position and exposing your group to the undead. Fire spreads via direct flame, radiant heat, burning embers, and superheated gases. Apartment buildings and dense urban areas become tinderboxes where one structure fire can spread to neighboring buildings through windows, balconies, and shared walls. Smoke detectors need batteries. Fire extinguishers empty quickly, and escape routes may be blocked. Most people's fire plan is, we'll be careful, but accidents happen. Candles tip over. Impromptu heating sources malfunction. Electrical systems overload. Cooking fires spread. In a world without emergency services, even small fires become life-threatening emergencies. A cut could kill you, but a stray spark will burn you out. Are you ready for the next threat, which is definitely out of your brain? Winter and weather. Zombie fiction usually happens in perfect weather, but real disasters don't wait for spring. Winter kills more people than zombies ever could, especially when heating systems fail and you can't simply turn up the thermostat. Many areas are only habitable because of modern HVAC. Without heating, sub-freezing regions become survival challenges that require proper gear, insulation, and heating fuel just to avoid freezing to death. Hypothermia sets in when your body temperature drops a few degrees. Mild hypothermia causes shivering and confusion. Severe causes cardiac arrest and death. It doesn't require Arctic conditions. Hypothermia can occur in temperatures as warm as 50-degree dash if you're wet, tired, or poorly insulated. But winter creates cascading problems. Frozen pipes mean no running water. Snow and ice make travel dangerous. Shorter daylight reduces time for scavenging and patrol. Heating fires require constant fuel and produce visible smoke that advertises your location. Food preservation becomes easier in winter, but acquisition becomes much harder. Edible plants die back. Animals migrate or hibernate, and hunting requires specialized cold weather skills and equipment most people lack. Seasonal affective disorder affects millions in normal winters with heated homes and social connections. Imagine the mental health impact of a cold, dark, isolated winter while fighting zombies. Nothing kills like cold. Zombies freeze, but people can't. Can you keep your blood pumping as we head into combat? Weapons and combat. Pop culture has convinced everyone that zombies require headshots, and headshots are easy. Both assumptions will get you killed. Headshots are incredibly difficult, even for trained marksmen. Military and law enforcement train to shoot center mass because it's a bigger target with higher hit probability. Special forces spend thousands of hours practicing precision headshots. Most civilian gun owners shoot at stationary paper targets under controlled conditions. Combat shooting involves moving targets, stress, adrenaline, limited time, and life or death consequences. Range accuracy doesn't equal zombie killing efficiency. Even if headshots are necessary and you're skilled, every shot broadcasts to every zombie within hearing range. The katana is the perfect zombie weapon myth deserves mention. Unless you're a trained swordsman with years of practice, a katana is more dangerous to you than zombies. Proper sword combat requires muscle memory, timing, and technique developed over years. Swinging a sharp blade around under stress is a great way to cut yourself, not your target. Most zombie-killing weapons, chainsaws, axes, crowbars, baseball bats, are either loud, require fuel, get stuck, or are exhausting to use repeatedly. Real combat is physically demanding. Swinging a heavy weapon enough times to clear zombies will leave you exhausted and vulnerable. The weapon reality nobody discusses. Maintenance. Blades get dull. Moving parts jam or break. Ammunition runs out. In the long run, the best weapons are simple. Reliable tools maintainable with basic skills and available materials. Headshots sound heroic, but bullets bring headaches. And that's just the start of the fight. How will your group hold together? Group dynamics. Every zombie team fantasy involves your closest friends working together seamlessly like a well-oiled machine. Reality check? Stress, fear, and resource scarcity turn even good people into potential enemies. Survival situations reveal true personalities. The friend who's fun at parties might panic under pressure. The quiet person might become the natural leader. The person you trust most might make decisions that risk the group. You won't know until the situation tests everyone. Resource allocation becomes a constant source of conflict. Who gets the last can of food? Who takes the dangerous supply run? Who gets the warm coat? Who sleeps in the safest spot? These daily decisions can create resentment and split groups apart. Leadership disputes are almost inevitable. In normal life, leadership roles are informal. In survival, leadership decisions directly impact everyone's safety. Different people will have strong opinions about group direction, priorities, and strategies. Without a clear structure, groups fragment or waste time arguing when they should be acting. The psychological toll of zombie survival includes watching people die, making life or death decisions, living in constant fear, and dealing with uncertain futures. These stressors cause depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health issues affecting group cohesion and judgment. But here's what people really don't consider. What happens when someone gets bitten? Most groups assume they'll make the hard choice to put infected members down quickly. In reality, denial, hope, and emotional attachment make these decisions nearly impossible. People will risk the entire group trying to save one infected person, especially if that person is family or a close friend. Looting secures your survival, but at what moral cost? Scavenging and looting. The empty stores are free for the taking mentality ignores a crucial reality. You're not the only person with that idea, and not everyone's going to share nicely. Other survivors represent a much greater threat than zombies. Zombies are predictable. Humans are unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of cooperation, deception, and violence in ways zombies can't match. Territorial disputes over prime scavenging locations, gun stores, pharmacies, grocery stores, hardware stores are inevitable. Encounters can escalate into armed conflicts more dangerous than zombie attacks because humans can plan, coordinate, and use tactics. The timeline problem nobody discusses. Early looting gets the best stuff, but late looting might be safer. Hit stores too early and you face crowds of panicked people and initial zombie spread. Wait too long and everything useful has been taken by other survivors. There's a narrow window where stores have been abandoned by staff, but not yet stripped clean by other scavengers. But even successful looting creates new problems. How do you transport bulky or heavy items? How do you get supplies back to your base without being followed? How do you store perishable goods without refrigeration? How do you inventory and ration what you found? Security during scavenging requires multiple people, lookouts, guards, carriers, but also increases noise and visibility. Solo scavenging is quieter but leaves you vulnerable if you're trapped or injured. Group scavenging is safer but attracts more attention and requires coordination. The psychological impact of looting shouldn't be ignored either. Taking others' property, even abandoned, can create guilt and stress. Breaking into homes and businesses goes against moral conditioning, affecting decision-making and mental health during already stressful situations. You survived week 1. Can you survive year 2? Let's look beyond canned beans. Long-term sustainability. Most zombie survival fantasies focus on the first few weeks or months, but what about year 2? Year 5? Long-term survival requires planning beyond immediate zombie threats. Agricultural knowledge becomes critical once stored food supplies are exhausted. Knowing which plants are edible, how to save seeds, when to plant crops, and how to preserve harvests isn't intuitive information. Most people can't identify common edible plants or distinguish them from similar-looking poisonous species. Tool maintenance and replacement present ongoing challenges. Metal tools rust, sharp edges dull, moving parts wear out. Without manufacturing infrastructure, every broken tool becomes irreplaceable. You must either stockpile massive backup quantities or learn to repair and manufacture tools using scavenged materials. Fuel production becomes necessary once stored gasoline expires. Ethanol can be produced from corn, potatoes, or other crops, but this requires knowledge of distillation, access to crops, and processing equipment. Biodiesel can be made from vegetable oils, but again requires specific knowledge and gear. Medical knowledge becomes increasingly important as first aid supplies run out and group members age. Understanding herbal medicine, basic surgery, wound care, and disease prevention could mean the difference between thriving and slowly dying from treatable conditions. Educational needs for children and survival groups present unique challenges. Kids need education to develop into functional adults, but traditional resources won't be available. Someone must teach reading, writing, basic math, and practical skills. Long-term group survival depends on raising the next generation with knowledge and skills. Social structure evolution happens whether you plan for it or not. Initial groups based on friendship or proximity will change as people prove valuable or problematic. Leadership will shift. New people will join or be turned away. Romance, marriage, and reproduction will create new family units. You've got seeds, soap, and systems. Now, what if the only weak link is the engine? Vehicle dependence. Cars seem like the perfect zombie apocalypse tool. Mobile shelter, storage, and weapons all in one package. But vehicle dependence creates as many problems as it solves. Fuel is the obvious limitation we've discussed, but maintenance creates ongoing challenges most people can't handle. Modern cars are complex machines with computerized systems, specialized parts, and maintenance needs that assume auto parts stores, mechanics, and diagnostic equipment. Tire wear becomes a major issue during extended use, especially off-road or through debris. Flat tires, sidewall damage, and tread wear will eventually leave you stranded. Spare tires are temporary solutions, and finding replacements during the apocalypse becomes nearly impossible. Battery maintenance requires either a working electrical system to keep batteries charged or access to replacements when originals die. Jump-starting assumes jumper cables and another working vehicle. Replacement assumes you can find correct battery types and have tools to install them. Oil changes, air filter replacements, brake maintenance, and other service needs don't disappear during emergencies. Skipping maintenance leads to breakdowns that can leave you stranded at the worst possible moment. Performing maintenance requires tools, parts, and knowledge most lack. Car engines are loud, especially when accelerating or climbing hills. Starting a cold engine can be heard from significant distances. Vehicle noise attracts both zombies and other survivors, creating more problems than mobility solves. Road conditions deteriorate without maintenance crews. Debris from accidents, abandoned vehicles, fallen trees, and infrastructure damage block roads or cause damage. Clearing obstacles requires tools and time, leaving you exposed. Most importantly, vehicle dependence creates psychological attachment to something ultimately expendable. People make poor survival decisions trying to protect or retrieve vehicles when they should abandon them and continue on foot. When your car dies, how do you call for help? Communication is your only helpline. Communication. Everyone assumes they'll just use cell phones until the battery dies, then figure out alternatives later. But communication is critical for group coordination, gathering information, and potential rescue contact. Cell networks fail quickly during emergencies. Towers require electricity and maintenance. Switching centers need power and technical support. Even if some towers remain functional, network overload from emergency calls can make connections impossible. Two-way radios offer better communication but require understanding frequencies, range limitations, and proper operation. Most people don't realize handheld radios have limited range, maybe a few miles in ideal conditions, much less in urban environments with buildings blocking signals. Battery power limits all electronic communication devices. Rechargeable batteries eventually wear out. Disposables become scarce. Solar chargers work but require sunny conditions and time to recharge. Information gathering requires news sources to understand zombie spread patterns, government response, safe zones, or evacuation routes. Without internet, TV, or radio broadcasts, groups become isolated and make decisions on outdated information. Communication protocols within your survival group prevent confusion. Who monitors radios? What are emergency signals? How do you communicate during scavenging? What's the backup plan if primary communication fails? Ham radio requires licenses and technical knowledge most don't have, but offers the best long-range options during emergencies. Learning ham basics before an emergency could provide critical communication when other systems fail. Security implications of communication can't be ignored. Radio transmissions can be intercepted by hostile survivors. Electronic devices can be tracked. Communication protocols can be compromised. Maintaining operational security while coordinating activities requires planning and discipline. You need sleep to survive, but sleep could kill you. Are you ready for the ultimate paradox? Sleep and security. You need sleep to survive, but sleeping makes you vulnerable. This creates a 24/7 security challenge that most zombie plans ignore. Guard duty rotation sounds simple until you implement it. How many people can your group spare for security without compromising other essential activities? How long can someone maintain effective alertness during a watch shift? What happens when guards fall asleep on duty due to exhaustion or boredom? Sleep deprivation affects decision-making, reaction time, and judgment in ways that can be fatal. Chronic sleep loss causes hallucinations, paranoia, and cognitive impairment. People make poor choices as sleep debt accumulates, but survival situations often prevent adequate rest. Secure sleeping locations require defensible positions with multiple exit routes, good visibility, and noise barriers that still let you hear approaching threats. Most buildings weren't designed with security in mind, so creating truly secure sleeping areas requires reinforcement and planning. Light discipline at night is critical. Flashlights, candles, and fires can be seen from long distances and attract unwanted attention, but complete darkness makes navigation, security, and emergency response difficult or impossible. Noise discipline while sleeping presents unique challenges. Snoring can attract zombies or reveal your location to hostile survivors. Moving around, talking, or having nightmares can compromise stealth. Some people need CPAP machines, which require electricity and make noise. Psychological factors affect sleep quality. Stress, fear, and hypervigilance cause insomnia, nightmares, and restless sleep. Poor sleep quality compounds stress and creates a cycle that affects group morale and effectiveness. The reality nobody wants to face. Adequate security and adequate sleep are competing priorities. Compromise either one, and you increase the risk of death from zombie attacks or poor decision-making due to exhaustion. We've all imagined what it would be like to live in a zombie movie, and you know what? It's just such an interesting topic to think and talk about. So I've decided to list everything people get wrong about zombie movies. Starting with one people overlook, brain myth. First up, that whole brain craving thing. Yeah, mostly garbage. The idea that zombies specifically hunt for brains comes from Return of the Living Dead back in 1985, where the zombies literally moan, "brains?" because it supposedly relieves the pain of being dead. But go back to the classics, like Night of the Living Dead, or check out out The Walking Dead and you'll see zombies chomping on whatever flesh they can grab. Arms, legs, guts. They're not picky. Even in games like Left 4 Dead, the infected just attack everything in sight without any special brain preference. The truth is, traditional zombie lore never specified brains at all. The Haitian voodoo origins that inspired early zombie stories were about enslaved people, not cannibals targeting your noggin specifically. Modern depictions lean into general flesh eating, because that's what actually makes biological sense if we're talking about mindless hunger. Return of the Living Dead was basically a horror comedy that turned a joke into pop culture gospel, and now everyone thinks zombies are running around like brainy vampires. But here's where it gets interesting. The brain myth actually reveals something deeper about how zombie evolution works across media. When Return of the Living Dead's writer Dan O'Bannon created talking, brain-craving zombies, he was deliberately breaking from Romero's rules to avoid copyright issues. The studio didn't own rights to traditional zombies, so they invented new mechanics where zombies could run, talk, and specifically explain their craving. The misconception persists because it's mimetically perfect. Brains became shorthand for zombies in pop culture the same way "it's alive" means Frankenstein. It's catchier than random flesh consumption, so it's stuck. But the deeper we go, the more the myths pile up. Like speed debate. Slow zombies came from the idea that rotting corpses can't exactly coordinate their muscles well. Romero's zombies were radiation-reanimated corpses that moved like walking decay. But if you're dealing with infected living people, like in 28 Days Later, they're not actually undead. They're just rabid and pumped full of rage virus. Their muscles still work, their blood still flows. So why wouldn't they run? The slow versus fast debate is really just about whether you're dealing with corpses or infected hosts, and both have appeared in the media for decades now. Dying Light even weaponized this by making zombies slow during the day but terrifyingly fast and much more deadly at night. Now here's where the speed myth connects to something way more dangerous. The entire debate about fast versus slow zombies is actually hiding a more fundamental question. Are we dealing with the undead or the infected? Survival shift. Undead zombies, the Romero classics, are reanimated corpses. No heartbeat, no breathing, no metabolism. They move slowly because rigor mortis, decomposition, and lack of oxygen to muscles makes coordination nearly impossible. But they also don't feel pain, don't need rest, and can technically function until their bodies physically fall apart. You can shoot one in the chest 50 times and it keeps coming because there's nothing vital to damage except the brainstem that's somehow still firing off movement commands. Infected zombies, the 28 Days Later rage monsters, are living humans with functioning biology that's been hijacked by a pathogen. They sprint because their muscles, cardiovascular system, and nervous system still work normally. They're just running on pure adrenaline and aggression with the rational brain shut off. But this means they have weaknesses undead don't have. They need to breathe, so drowning works. They need food and water, so they eventually starve. They can die from blood loss, infection from wounds, or just exhaustion from sprinting for hours. The Last of Us brilliantly splits this difference with its cordyceps infection. Early-stage runners are still mostly human biology running on fungal autopilot, so they're fast and dangerous. But as the infection progresses, the fungus literally replaces human tissue with its own growths. Clickers are slower but armored in fungal plates that make headshots nearly impossible. Bloaters are walking fungal fortresses that have been gestating for years, barely mobile, but incredibly tough. The game's entire combat system is built around recognizing which stage you're fighting and adjusting tactics accordingly. World War Z, the novel, actually addressed this scientifically. The book's zombies were undead, and author Max Brooks calculated that their slow speed was actually an advantage for spreading globally. Fast zombies burn through local populations quickly, but then have nothing left to eat. Slow zombies create a steady, inevitable wave that pushes survivors ahead of them, spreading panic and refugees who carry infection to new areas. The movie threw this out for spectacle, making them fast enough to create CGI tidal waves of bodies. But it sacrificed the terrifying mathematics of a slow, patient apocalypse. So when people argue about fast versus slow, they're really arguing about biology versus supernatural horror. Fast infected are scarier in the moment, pure nightmare fuel when you're being chased. Slow undead are existentially scarier because they represent an unstoppable force that will eventually reach you no matter where you hide. Both are valid horror approaches, but mixing them up means preparing for the wrong threat. If you thought speed confusion was bad, wait until you hear about the name game, genre blindness. This creates what fans call genre blindness, where characters spend weeks figuring out basic zombie rules that any horror fan knows by heart. Headshots kill them, bites infect you, they're attracted to noise. All stuff we learned from pop culture. But in these shows, survivors act like they're encountering brand new monsters. Shaun of the Dead brilliantly mocked this by having characters casually reference zombie movies while fighting actual zombies, showing how ridiculous it is to pretend the genre doesn't exist. The excuse is that it builds realism and suspense, but really it just delays characters from acting smart and forces them through predictable learning curves that frustrate audiences. Okay, we've covered the fun myths. Brains, speed, the Z word. Those are the misconceptions that fuel Reddit arguments and bar debates. But starting right now, we're entering the danger zone. The next 4 lies are the ones that would actually get you killed because they fundamentally misrepresent how zombie physics, combat, and social collapse actually work. Zombie decay. Now let's talk about zombie durability, because this one's physically impossible and everyone ignores it. Movies love showing zombies that have been wandering around for months or even years, still moaning and biting like they're fresh off the assembly line. The Walking Dead has zombies active across multiple seasons spanning years. But in reality, a human corpse exposed to the elements would fall apart in weeks, maybe months tops. Bacteria would eat the tissue, weather would break down the skin, and without a functioning immune system or cellular repair, they'd be piles of bones before the first winter ended. Some shows try to acknowledge this. 28 Weeks Later mentioned that the infected starved to death after a few months. The Last of Us actually stages its infected, showing how they evolve from runners to clickers to bloaters as the fungus takes over and armors them up. State of Decay, a zombie survival game, even built decay mechanics where zombies gradually weaken over time. But most media just handwaves it because a zombie apocalypse that solves itself in 6 months doesn't make for a long-running TV series. The science says nature would win pretty quickly, but drama says the dead stay threatening forever. The decay timeline is about the entire ecosystem turning against them. Insects would be feasting on exposed flesh within hours. Maggots would colonize wounds and eye sockets. Carrion birds would peck at the slow-moving buffet. Wild animals, from feral dogs to wolves to bears, would learn quickly that zombies can't fight back effectively against pack tactics or large predators. Within months, nature would be doing most of your zombie clearing work for free. But here's the catch that the media never addresses. What happens in different climates? The Walking Dead mostly takes place in temperate zones where decay happens at a moderate pace. But imagine zombies in the Arizona desert. Direct sunlight and 100-degree heat would mummify exposed flesh within weeks, potentially preserving them longer but making them brittle and easier to shatter. In tropical environments, the heat and humidity would accelerate decomposition exponentially. And then there's winter. Zombies in northern climates would freeze solid during cold months, becoming ice statues until spring thaw. The Walking Dead hinted at this when survivors talked about winter being easier, but never fully explored the implications. Canada, Russia, Scandinavia, these places would see zombie threats completely neutralized for half the year. You could literally walk up to frozen zombies and shatter them with a hammer. But the spring thaw would reanimate thousands at once. Some media tried to address this. The novel World War Z included a chapter about zombies walking across the ocean floor because they don't need to breathe, accumulating in underwater hordes before washing up on beaches. It also covered frozen zombies in the Arctic that remained threats for years. The Zombie Survival Guide, also by Max Brooks, calculated that zombies in extreme cold could remain preserved indefinitely, creating permanent dead zones in polar regions. But most shows and movies ignore climate entirely because it would solve the apocalypse too quickly. The real question is whether the zombie pathogen itself provides any preservation. If it's a virus keeping cells minimally active, maybe that slows rot slightly. If it's fungal like The Last of Us, the fungus might literally hold the body together with its network of fibers the way it does with dead insects in nature. If it's supernatural, all bets are off and zombies could walk until the heat death of the universe. But anything trying to be scientifically plausible has to admit that unmodified human corpses have an expiration date measured in weeks, not years. Weapon reality. The weapons misconception might be the most dangerous if this ever happened for real. Movies make killing zombies look effortless. One stab to the head with a screwdriver and boom, done. Michonne in The Walking Dead swings her katana and skulls split like watermelons. Rick Grimes casually stabs zombies through the eye socket with a knife, but human skulls are incredibly thick and tough. Forensic studies show it takes serious force to penetrate bone, and most improvised weapons would either bounce off or get stuck. You'd exhaust yourself after a few kills, and God help you if you miss. Resident Evil gets closer to reality with its boss zombies that tank multiple headshots before going down. The Last of Us put armored plating on clicker heads from the fungal growth, forcing players to use precious ammo or explosives. In real life, blunt weapons weapons would probably just concuss a zombie without destroying the brain, and edged weapons would dull fast on bone. The whole aim for the head strategy works in theory, but execution is way harder than movies admit. VR zombie games are teaching people this the hard way, where actually landing headshots under pressure is brutal. The weapons problem extends beyond just penetrating skulls. There's the exhaustion factor that movies completely ignore. A katana like Michonne's looks elegant slicing through zombie necks, but real swordsmanship is incredibly tiring. Historical records show that medieval soldiers in battle could only fight intensely for 15 to 20 minutes before exhaustion set in, and they were trained athletes. An average survivor swinging a baseball bat or machete would be gasping for air after a few kills, arms burning, hands blistering. Then there's weapon maintenance, something almost no zombie media addresses. Realistically, blades dull after hitting bone repeatedly, metal bats dent and crack, wooden handles splinter from impact stress, guns need cleaning after firing or they jam, and ammunition has a shelf life that degrades over years. Some games tried to incorporate this. Dead Island had weapon durability systems where your machete would eventually break from overuse, forcing you to find workbenches for repairs. State of Decay 2 made you manage facility mods for weapon crafting and maintenance. But even these systems are generous compared to reality. A real improvised weapon like a nail-studded board would fall apart after a dozen swings. A fire axe would get stuck in a skull and require leverage to extract, leaving you vulnerable during zombie attack number 2. The melee versus range debate is also more complex than media shows. Guns solve the skull penetration problem with sheer force, but they're loud, attracting more zombies, and ammo runs out. Bows and crossbows are quiet and reusable, but require immense skill to land headshots, especially on moving targets. Daryl makes it look easy, but bow hunting requires immense skill and practice even on stationary targets. Trying to headshot a lurching zombie while panicking? Your bolt is flying wild. Melee keeps you silent and doesn't run out, but puts you in bite range every single time. One slip, one stumble, one zombie you didn't see grabbing your ankle, and you're infected. The risk-reward calculation means ranged is better when you have ammo. Melee is suicidal desperation. But movies show survivors casually wading into zombie hordes with knives, like it's a reasonable tactic. It's not. It's how you die quickly while looking cool. The zombies themselves add variables most people don't consider. Fresh zombies still have muscle tension and can grip hard. A zombie grabbing your weapon arm isn't letting go without serious damage to its hand, which it doesn't care about. Skeletal zombies are actually more dangerous with melee because there's less flesh to slow your blade, meaning you might swing through a skull and into your own leg on follow-through. Armored zombies like riot gear cops or construction workers with hard hats make headshots nearly impossible without heavy weapons. Historical weapons would actually be better than modern improvised gear. A proper warhammer or mace is designed to crush skulls through helmets, which is basically what you need. A spear keeps distance while allowing thrusting attacks to the eye socket. Roman gladius swords were short and stabby, perfect for close quarters brain destruction, but good luck finding a functioning medieval armory in suburban America. You're stuck with sporting goods store, baseball bats, and kitchen knives, tools never designed for zombie combat. If you are enjoying the video so far and want to discuss or get mad at me for my rankings, join my Discord, link in the description. Military collapse. If you're thinking the military would save us, think again. One of the biggest myths is that organized armed forces would crumble immediately, and while that's dramatic, it's probably overblown. World War Z, the book, actually detailed exactly how modern military tactics failed, like the Battle of Yonkers, where soldiers trained for center mass shots couldn't adapt to headshots fast enough. Fear the Walking Dead showed the collapse in slow motion, with National Guard units abandoning posts as society fell apart. But realistically, militaries have adapted to way weirder threats throughout history. The problem in zombie fiction is always panic and morale collapse, not capability. Soldiers get overwhelmed because they hesitate, or commanders make bad calls, or infected troops turn inside the ranks like in Operation Undead. But if militaries actually trained for headshot protocols and set up proper fire lines, zombies wouldn't stand much chance against coordinated firepower. Kingdom, a Korean period drama with zombies, actually showed a feudal military adapting successfully with spear formations targeting heads. The instant collapse is a plot device to isolate survivors, not a realistic outcome. Zombies win in fiction because we need them for the story, not because armed forces are incompetent. Here's one that drives scientists crazy. Let me connect something that should be obvious, but isn't. If zombies decay in months, and militaries could adapt tactics, and weapons barely work for individuals, then why does every zombie story show humanity losing catastrophically? Why are we always on the edge of extinction? Because the next 3 misconceptions reveal that zombie fiction is structurally designed to make us fail. These aren't just lies about zombies. They're lies about human nature that explain why every apocalypse story follows the same pattern of collapse. Dark truths, the cure myth, the infighting inevitability, and the forgotten origins of zombie folklore all serve the same narrative purpose, removing hope and forcing survivors into impossible choices. And once you see the pattern, you realize zombie stories aren't about surviving monsters. They're about watching ourselves become monsters. Let's start with the false hope that drives half of all zombie plots: the obsession with finding a cure. So many zombie stories revolve around survivors desperately seeking out labs or scientists to cook up a vaccine and save humanity. I Am Legend had Will Smith working on a cure for years. The Last of Us built its entire emotional core around Ellie being immune and potentially holding the key. Sounds noble, right? Except most survivors aren't virologists or microbiologists. They're teachers, mechanics, random people who can barely keep themselves fed. Robert Kirkman said it best when he confirmed there's no cure coming in The Walking Dead because none of these people have the expertise or resources to create one. Real pandemic responses take teams of researchers and functioning labs with stable power and supply chains. In an apocalypse, you're lucky if you find clean water. True, the cure quest is a false hope that diverts energy from actual survival. Zombieland 2 played with immunity as a gag, but even then, it was useless without infrastructure to develop treatments. The smartest survivors stop chasing miracle solutions and focus on building sustainable communities. But that doesn't make for exciting hero journeys. So media keeps pushing the cure myth. The cure obsession also creates a dangerous leadership dynamic in survivor groups. In The Walking Dead, when Eugene claimed to know a cure and convinced everyone to trek to Washington, D.C., he was lying, but people followed him because hope is intoxicating. Entire communities have been led to their deaths in zombie media by charlatans promising vaccines or government safe zones that don't exist. It's basically the apocalypse version of a cargo cult, waiting for salvation from the sky while doing nothing practical for survival. I Am Legend explored this from the opposite angle. Robert Neville actually was a scientist, actually had the training and equipment to work on a cure. But even he, with a fully stocked lab and years of research, only made incremental progress while slowly going insane from isolation. The film version ended with him creating a cure through his own sacrifice. Classic Hollywood hope. But the book's original ending, which the movie's alternate cut restored, revealed something darker. The infected had evolved into a new society that saw Neville as the monster. There was no curing them because they weren't diseased, they were different now. The Last of Us deconstructed the cure myth brutally in its first season finale. Ellie was immune, truly held the potential for a vaccine, but creating it would kill her, and Joel chose her life over humanity's slim chance at salvation. The show asked whether sacrificing a child for a maybe cure created by a ragtag group of survivors with spotty electricity was even ethical. It presented the hope for a cure as the villain's motivation, showing how that obsession can justify any atrocity. Realistically, vaccine development takes years of trials, manufacturing infrastructure, and distribution networks. Even if someone created a working zombie vaccine in an apocalypse, how do you produce billions of doses without factories? How do you distribute them without transportation infrastructure? How do you convince paranoid survivors to take injections from strangers? The logistics alone make the cure quest pointless for anyone who isn't part of a functioning government with resources. But the media keeps pushing it because Survive and Rebuild doesn't have the same heroic ring as Save the World, human infighting. Now let's get real about human nature, because this misconception actually reflects reality. People love to complain that infighting among survivors is unrealistic or avoidable, that humans would band together against a common enemy. But every study of human behavior under scarcity and stress says the opposite. The Walking Dead didn't become a show about zombies. It became a show about humans being absolute monsters to each other. Factions warred over resources, leaders like the governor and Negan terrorized communities, and cannibals like Terminus literally barbecued people. This isn't bad writing. It's Lord of the Flies on steroids. History is packed with examples of societies collapsing into violence when rules break down. The Whisperers in The Walking Dead took it further by wearing zombie skin and rejecting humanity entirely. Daybreak showed teen factions forming and fracturing. The whole humans are the real monsters theme works because it's backed by psychology and history. Scarcity breeds conflict, trust is fragile, and when you remove law enforcement and social contracts, people revert to survival instincts that aren't pretty. Zombie stories that skip this are the unrealistic ones, not the ones drowning in betrayal and brutality. The infighting gets even darker when you consider that zombie apocalypses don't just reveal human evil, they incentivize it. Resource scarcity makes cruelty logical. If your group has 10 people and food for 5, either 5 people leave to die, or you take resources from another group by force. There's no moral option, only degrees of horrible. The Walking Dead's Terminus group started as good people offering offering sanctuary. But after being raided and brutalized, they literally became cannibals who lured in survivors as livestock. Trauma created monsters. Fear the Walking Dead showed this progression in real time during its early seasons. Strand started as a selfish conman, but became a brutal warlord running a survivor colony through fear and manipulation. Victor's arc demonstrated that apocalypse leadership rewards sociopathy. The people who thrive are the ones willing to make ruthless calls, sacrifice others, and suppress empathy. Democracy and consensus building get you killed when a horde is approaching, and someone needs to decide who gets left behind. Psychology explains why cooperation fails. Even when working together helps everyone, betraying your group to save yourself is constantly rewarded in these scenarios. In zombie settings, betraying your group to save yourself is constantly rewarded. The governor in The Walking Dead survived by being willing to kill anyone who threatened his power. Rick's group survived by being willing to murder other survivors preemptively if they seemed dangerous. The nice guys died in season 1. There's also the trust paradox. You need other people to survive. Groups are stronger than individuals. But every person you let into your group is a potential betrayer, a mouth to feed, a security risk. The optimal strategy is small, tight-knit groups of people with personal bonds, which is why most survivor communities in fiction are either tiny families or large authoritarian structures. The middle ground of democratic communities gets wiped out because they're too trusting to new members and too divided internally to act decisively. Real-world disaster psychology backs this up. Studies of hurricane survivors, earthquake victims, and wartime populations show that prosocial behavior spikes initially but declines as crises extend. After weeks of suffering, people start hoarding, forming hostile in-groups, and treating outsiders as threats. The difference with zombies is there's no end date, no government relief coming. It's a permanent crisis, which means permanent tribalism and conflict. The Walking Dead wasn't exaggerating human darkness. It was extrapolating inevitable outcomes, forgotten origins. One misconception people don't even realize they have is thinking zombies are a modern Hollywood invention. Nope, the roots go way deeper into folklore and colonial horror. Haitian voodoo tradition talked about zombies as enslaved people brought back through toxins like tetrodotoxin, controlled by bokors for labor. White Zombie in 1932 tapped into this, showing zombies as mindless servants, not flesh-eating monsters. The modern viral zombie didn't show up until Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968, which stripped away the voodoo angle and replaced it with radiation and cannibalism. This shift erased the cultural and historical context of zombies as metaphors for slavery and oppression. Kingdom blended this back in by setting zombies in feudal Korea, connecting them to class struggles. iZombie played with zombie identity in modern Seattle, but most blockbuster zombie media ignores the folklore entirely in favor of viral outbreaks or fungal infections, treating zombies as generic monsters without acknowledging where they came from. The Haitian connection includes real documented cases like Clairvius Narcisse, who was allegedly zombified and later recovered. Recognizing these roots enriches the genre beyond just apocalypse thrills, and reminds us that zombie horror was born from real human trauma. The voodoo origins also explain why modern zombie media is so obsessed with contagion and infection. The original Haitian zombies weren't contagious. A bokor controlled them through poison and psychological manipulation, and if you weren't targeted, you were safe. But that model doesn't create apocalypses. You need viral spread mechanics for true catastrophic collapse, which is why every modern zombie origin involves bites, blood, or airborne pathogens that turn the undead into exponentially growing threats. Romero's Night of the Living Dead was deliberately vague about origins, showing radiation from a Venus probe as a possible cause, but never confirming anything. That ambiguity allowed the zombies to feel like a force of nature rather than a solvable problem. But as zombie media exploded, creators wanted to explain their monsters scientifically. 28 Days Later used a rage virus created by animal rights activists releasing infected chimps. Resident Evil went full mad science with bioweapons developed by evil corporations. The Walking Dead proposed that everyone is already infected, and death simply activates the pathogen. The Last of Us chose cordyceps fungus, inspired by real parasitic fungi that hijack ant brains in nature. The game's intro shows a 1968 talk show where a scientist warns that if fungi could survive human body temperatures, they could theoretically control us. The game extrapolated this into human infection with horrifying stages: runners, stalkers, clickers, bloaters. But here's what The Last of Us gets wrong according to actual mycologists. Cordyceps is not a single fungus, but a genus of over 400 species, each adapted to specific hosts. The ant-controlling species can't even infect other insects, let alone mammals. Human body temperature is specifically prohibitive to most fungi, which is why fungal infections in humans are usually skin deep or affect immunocompromised patients. A fungus sophisticated enough to control human motor functions while keeping the body ambulatory would require evolution that makes the leap from ants to humans less plausible than supernatural resurrection. The show's creators acknowledged this, saying they embraced the implausibility because it was fresh. Fungal zombies hadn't been done to death like viral ones, and the visual horror of mushrooms erupting from skulls, characters seeing fungal tendrils connecting infected, and the environmental storytelling of fungal overgrowth consuming cities created an aesthetic no virus could match. It was about drama and uniqueness over scientific accuracy, which is fine for fiction, but it means The Last of Us's zombies are just as fantastical as Romero's radiation corpses. This pattern of origin shifting reveals audience evolution. Each era's zombie origins reflect what that generation finds terrifying. We fear pandemics and ecological collapse, so we get fungi and engineered pathogens. Our grandparents feared nuclear annihilation, so they got radiation zombies. The Haitian roots get lost in this evolution, but they matter because they frame zombies as metaphors rather than literal threats. Voodoo zombies represented colonial fear of slave uprisings and the horror of enslavement stripping away personhood. Modern zombies represent whatever we're currently afraid of: consumerism in Dawn of the Dead's Mall, disease in 28 Days Later, post-9/11 bioterror fears, environmental collapse in The Last of Us. Understanding where zombies came from helps decode what they mean now. And finally, let's kill the idea that gore is what makes zombie stories scary. Sure, Dawn of the Dead's 2004 remake was a blood-soaked spectacle, and The Last of Us doesn't shy away from ripping throats out on screen, but the truly terrifying zombie media isn't about the splatter, it's about what the zombies represent. Night of the Living Dead was scary because it showed society collapsing and humans trapped with nowhere to go, not because of gut-munching close-ups. In the Flesh was a British show that barely showed gore but explored zombies reintegrating into society and facing prejudice, which was haunting in a completely different way. Gore Worship. Pontypool did psychological zombie horror through a radio station where the infection spread through language itself, no visuals needed. Gore is a tool, not the foundation. Excessive violence can even desensitize audiences or cover up weak storytelling. The best zombie fiction uses gore sparingly to punctuate moments of horror while building tension through isolation, moral collapse, and the slow realization that the dead rising is just the start of humanity's problems. The Last of Us balanced brutal kills with emotional character beats and won awards for it. When zombie media leans too hard on splatter, it becomes empty violence. When it uses the undead as a mirror for societal rot, corruption, and our worst instincts, that's when it becomes unforgettable. Every single misconception is a deliberate narrative tool designed to strip away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about civilization, morality, and human nature. Zombie fiction succeeds not because it shows us scary monsters, but because it forces us to confront what we become when the monsters arrive. The undead are just the catalyst. We're the reaction. And the reason these stories resonate across generations is because deep down, we suspect they're right about us. Everyone has imagined what it would be like to try and survive in a zombie apocalypse. And it's probably because it's super fun to imagine and interesting to talk about, but after this video, you will never imagine it in the same way. I've decided to list everything people get wrong about zombie apocalypse survival, starting with one people overlook: endless hordes. Most zombie fans assume the undead will roam forever, creating an endless nightmare that never stops. The Walking Dead shows walkers stumbling around for years, and World War Z depicts massive swarms that seem unstoppable across entire continents. Zombies would decompose insanely fast. Without immune systems or metabolism, their bodies become instant buffets for bacteria, insects, and scavengers. In hot, humid climates, maggots would reduce them to skeletons within weeks. Cold weather would freeze their tissue until bones snap like twigs. Even the rage-infected from 28 Days Later, who are technically alive, would starve to death since they can't process food for energy. Animals would treat slow-moving zombies like easy prey, tearing them apart before they could form threatening hordes. The Walking Dead's endless waves of intact walkers year after year completely ignores basic biology and environmental breakdown. The truth is, you could literally wait them out in a secure location, and nature would do most of the work for you. This flips the entire survival strategy from constant running to smart fortification and patience. If you thought that was a relief, wait until you hear what people get wrong about actually fighting these things. Easy headshots. Everyone thinks popping zombies with perfect headshots is straightforward because Resident Evil and Left 4 Dead make it look simple. Rick Grimes, in The Walking Dead, nails walker skulls with his Colt revolver like he's at a shooting range, and Alice in Resident Evil performs acrobatic kills with pinpoint accuracy. But military training data shows that even experienced soldiers struggle with headshots under stress. The human skull is tough. Bullets can deflect off bone at bad angles, and your hands shake when adrenaline floods your system. Center mass shots are what professionals train for, because they're far more reliable for stopping threats. The myth that you can casually headshot zombies ignores that most people have never fired a gun in their lives, let alone at a moving target while panicking. In World War Z, soldiers spray bullets everywhere during massive swarms because precision becomes impossible in chaos. Train to Busan shows desperate survivors swinging bats wildly because landing clean hits is way harder than it looks. The video game stats showing 100% kill rates on headshots create unrealistic expectations that would leave you out of ammo and surrounded by very alive zombies. Forget the Hollywood accuracy and aim for immobilization instead, because a zombie with broken legs can't chase you even if its head is intact. This completely changes how you think about combat efficiency and ammo conservation. That ammunition problem leads directly to the next massive misconception that could leave you defenseless when you need weapons most. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Even if you somehow became a headshot expert, you're solving the wrong problem. Because what nobody tells you is that a zombie with a destroyed brain can still kill you if it falls on you during the shot. The weight of a corpse, the momentum of its fall, the bodily fluids spraying everywhere one 180-pound walker collapsing onto you could pin you down long enough for 3 more to join the feast. Military combat reports show that neutralized enemies still pose threats through their mass and position. You'd spend so much time and ammo perfecting kills that you'd forget the most important rule: distance and barriers, not accuracy. Keep you breathing. Guns everywhere. The Walking Dead characters constantly fire guns. Resident Evil revolves around finding bigger weapons, and Left 4 Dead gives you unlimited firearms to blast through infected. Everyone assumes that having guns means you're safe, and the louder and flashier the weapon, the better your chances. Here's the problem. Every gunshot is a dinner bell for every zombie within hearing range. Suppressors help, but they're rare and not actually silent like movies pretend. Ammunition expires within months if not stored properly, and you definitely can't carry enough to fight off real hordes. The noise from Rick's revolver in The Walking Dead would attract walkers from blocks away, turning every encounter into a bigger threat. Resident Evil's endless ammo cheats are pure fantasy, and in reality, you'd run dry fast. Quieter options like Daryl's crossbow or basic melee weapons let you stay off the radar. 28 days later, survivors use cricket bats because stealth beats firepower when noise means death. Army of the Dead shows how guns create cascading problems when shots echo through empty cities, drawing more infected than you can possibly handle. Smart survivors would treat guns as absolute last resorts and rely on silent weapons to avoid becoming the center of attention. This means rethinking your entire defensive strategy around staying quiet instead of going loud. And speaking of bad strategies, people make terrible choices about where to find supplies. But even knowing all this, people still make a more fundamental mistake about where they plan to get these weapons in the first place. But let's talk about what actually happens when you fire that gun. It's the flash, the smell of gunpowder, the brass casings hitting the ground. In complete darkness, which is what most of a post-apocalypse world looks like without electricity, your muzzle flash blinds you for precious seconds and tells every threat within visual range exactly where you are. Night vision? Good luck finding batteries that work after 6 months. The reality is that one trigger pull creates a sensory beacon that marks you as either prey or competition to everything in the area, living or dead. And if you're indoors, the concussive force in enclosed spaces can rupture your eardrums, leaving you disoriented and unable to hear approaching threats. Suddenly that pistol feels less like protection and more like a suicide button. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want to be a part of a larger community and get your views actual notice, the Discord server is absolutely for you. Link is in the description below. Store rating. The first thing everyone plans to do is hit up the grocery store or pharmacy, just like the survivors in Dawn of the Dead who hole up in a shopping mall. World War Z shows panicked crowds flooding stores in the early outbreak, and the Walking Dead survivors constantly search abandoned shops. But think about it. Every desperate person has the same idea. Stores become death traps packed with infected shoppers fighting over the last supplies. The mall in Dawn of the Dead turns into a siege precisely because it's an obvious target. Chaos at supply points spreads infection faster than anywhere else when people are crammed together in panic mode. Georgetown emergency management experts point out that preparing at home before disaster strikes gives you way better odds than joining the mob. Rural scavenging from scattered houses means less competition and fewer infected encounters. The Walking Dead's early seasons show characters dying in stores because crowds turn into feeding frenzies. Train to Busan demonstrates how public spaces become instant kill zones when everyone converges on the same spots. Stock up at home ahead of time or skip the obvious targets entirely, because the crowd will get you killed faster than the zombies. This shifts survival prep from reactive scrambling to proactive planning before things go south. But even with supplies handled, people seriously underestimate the wrong threat. But avoiding stores might save you from crowds, yet there's an even deadlier threat that everyone underestimates until it's too late. And there's another layer to the store problem that nobody thinks about. Legal liability turns into lethal reality. Those same stores have security systems, locked cages, and reinforced areas designed to keep people out. In a panic, you're trying to break into a pharmacy cage while zombies break into the store. You're making noise with crowbars and bolt cutters, you're trapped in corners with limited exits, and you're surrounded by glass and aluminum that amplifies every sound. Plus, stores are designed with customer flow in mind. Long aisles, limited sight lines, and choke points at checkouts. It's a shooting gallery where you're the target. The survivors who raid stores successfully in movies have something you won't: empty stores. In reality, you'll arrive to find hundreds of people with the same idea, which means you're not just avoiding zombies, you're navigating a human stampede in the worst possible terrain. Zombie focus. Every zombie story puts the undead front and center as the main danger. The Walking Dead, World War Z, and 28 Days Later all make zombies the primary antagonists that survivors must constantly fear and fight. But look closer at those same stories, and you'll notice something. Humans cause more deaths than zombies. The governor in The Walking Dead slaughters more people than walkers ever did at the prison. Negan and the Saviors prove that organized human threats are deadlier than shambling corpses. Real disaster studies show that resource conflicts, betrayal, and desperation turn people into worse monsters than any zombie. In World War Z, the geopolitical collapse and human panic kill millions before zombies even reach most areas. The Last of Us demonstrates how survivor factions become the actual enemy, with bandits and cannibals more terrifying than clickers. Army of the Dead features human betrayal as the twist that dooms the entire mission, not the alpha zombies. 28 Weeks Later shows military incompetence and cover-ups spreading infection more than the rage virus itself. Trust is your biggest vulnerability because other survivors might rob you, kill you for food, or throw you to the zombies to save themselves. This means your survival strategy must account for human threats as much as or more than the undead lurking outside. And while people worry about bites, they ignore something way more deadly. And that vulnerability extends beyond human threats to something even more insidious that's killing you from the inside: bite obsession. The Walking Dead makes everyone paranoid about bites and scratches. Resident Evil focuses on infection from zombie attacks, and The Last of Us shows spore exposure as the transmission method everyone fears. But everyday health problems would kill you way faster than zombie infections. Appendicitis becomes a death sentence without surgery. Infected wisdom teeth or dental cavities could cause blood poisoning. Minor cuts turn septic without antibiotics. Poor hygiene leads to dysentery and parasites from contaminated water. The rule of threes says you die in 3 hours without shelter in extreme weather, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Zombies aren't even on that list because dehydration and exposure kill quicker. Army of the Dead survivors ignore basic first aid until injuries fester. The Walking Dead rarely shows characters dealing with chronic conditions like diabetes or asthma, which would be fatal when medications run out. Real disaster scenarios prove that disease from rotting corpses in cities spreads faster than zombie bites. Water treatment through boiling or filtering prevents more deaths than any anti-zombie measures. Stock medical supplies, learn first aid, and treat hygiene like your life depends on it, because it absolutely does. This means survival prep looks more like a camping medical kit than a weapons cache. But people also make terrible assumptions about where to survive. But even if you solve every health issue, you're still stuck in the worst possible location without realizing it. Here's the dark truth about medical emergencies that zombie media never shows. Without anesthesia, even simple procedures become impossible. Imagine trying to remove an infected appendix on a kitchen table with someone screaming. Now imagine that noise attracting every zombie in a half-mile radius. The person dies from shock or blood loss, and your whole group dies from the horde that showed up for dinner. Or consider this: mental health collapse. PTSD, depression, and survivor's guilt would be universal, yet nobody's stockpiling psychiatric medications or therapy skills. The Walking Dead touches on this with characters breaking down, but the reality would be far worse. Suicide rates would skyrocket, people would become catatonic, and group cohesion would shatter under psychological pressure. You're not just treating wounds. You're managing trauma in a world where breaking down mentally means breaking down physically, and both mean death. City defense. Urban environments seem perfect in 28 Days Later and Resident Evil's Raccoon City, with all those supplies and fortified buildings. The Walking Dead shows Alexandria as a walled community inside city limits. and World War Z depicts military defenses in urban centers. But cities are death traps for multiple reasons. Rotting corpses everywhere spread disease faster than zombies spread infection. Dense populations mean massive hordes of infected people concentrated in small areas. Infrastructure fails immediately, leaving no power, water, or sewage systems. The Last of Us shows how urban environments become fungal nightmares when buildings trap moisture and decay. High-rise apartments in Train to Busan become vertical coffins when stairwells fill with infection. Dawn of the Dead's mall works temporarily, but eventually attracts too many zombies and hostile humans. Military containment in 28 weeks later fails because cities have too many entry points to secure. Science experts point out that urban heat accelerates zombie decomposition but also creates unbearable living conditions for survivors. Get to rural areas with natural water sources, lower population density, and space to grow food. Islands work even better since zombies can't swim, as World War Z mentions with offshore havens. This completely changes where you plan to go when the outbreak hits, and even if you pick the right location. People mess up the timing and that assumption about rescue coming eventually. It's built on a fantasy about military response that completely ignores reality. Quick resolution. Everyone assumes the military will handle outbreaks quickly, like in Resident Evil where special forces show up, or World War Z where governments coordinate global responses. The Walking Dead implies that help is coming in early episodes before characters realize it's not, but logistics make fast responses impossible. The military can't be everywhere at once, and communication breaks down immediately during widespread panic. Historical disaster responses show that even prepared organizations take days or weeks to mobilize effectively. World War Z's book version details how bureaucracy and denial delay action until it's too late. The Last of Us shows how a single outbreak night spirals into total collapse before authorities can react. 28 weeks later demonstrates that even with military containment, one mistake reignites the entire infection. Army of the Dead reveals that governments just nuke problem zones instead of mounting rescues. Survival dispatch experts note that civilians should plan for prolonged independence because rescue won't arrive in time, if at all. Prepare to survive on your own for months or years, not days, because nobody is coming to save you. This means your entire supply strategy needs to account for the long haul, not just the first week. But people also get basic priorities completely backwards. Let's say you've survived the initial chaos and dodged the military collapse. You still face a resource crisis that most people completely misunderstand. And let's destroy another comfortable fantasy while we're at it. Communication is dead, and it's never coming back. No cell phones, no internet, no radio networks except maybe ham radio if you know how to use it, which you don't. This means you can't coordinate with other survivors, can't call for help, can't get weather warnings, and can't know what's happening one town over. The Walking Dead characters somehow always find each other through sheer plot convenience, but reality means permanent isolation. You could walk into an area that was cleared yesterday and is now overrun today, with no way to know until you're surrounded. Or here's worse, you could be 50 miles from a functioning survivor community with food, medicine, and safety, but you'd never know it exists. The information blackout doesn't just make survival harder, it makes hope impossible, because you can't know if things are getting better or if you're alone in a dead world. Food first. Everyone focuses on stockpiling food because zombie media shows survivors raiding kitchens and fighting over rations. The Walking Dead constantly features food scarcity, and World War Z shows supply chain collapse making meals scarce. But water kills you way faster than hunger. 3 days without water versus 3 weeks without food means hydration is your top priority. Clean water sources are harder to secure than you think because municipal systems fail immediately. Boiling and filtering become essential skills that most people don't have. The Walking Dead rarely shows the reality of water purification efforts. Army of the Dead characters lug around guns instead of water containers. Reddit survival communities emphasize that water stockpiles run out fast, so you need sustainable sources like rainwater collection or natural springs. Dehydration impairs your judgment and physical ability, making you zombie food even if you have a full pantry. Secure clean water first, then worry about food, because all the canned goods in the world won't help if you die of thirst. This reordering of priorities changes what you pack and where you go during evacuation. And speaking of supplies, people assume things last forever. Water might kill you in days, but the next mistake ensures you won't even survive that long. Eternal resources. Video games like Left 4 Dead and Resident Evil let you find supplies in perfect condition years after the outbreak. The Walking Dead shows characters using vehicles and generators long after infrastructure collapse, but everything degrades fast without maintenance. Gasoline goes bad in 3 to 6 months, turning vehicles into useless metal boxes. Batteries corrode, medications expire, and canned food loses nutritional value over time. No HVAC means you die from heat stroke or hypothermia in extreme climates. Survivors in Army of the Dead find Las Vegas full of useless gear because time destroyed everything. 28 weeks later shows how quickly London falls apart without human maintenance. Generators need fuel and create carbon monoxide poisoning in enclosed spaces, something Resident Evil conveniently ignores. Real preppers know that sustainable solutions like solar chargers, manual tools, and preserved food through old-school methods are the only long-term answers. Plan for resource production, not just consumption, because scavenging runs dry fast. This means learning skills like farming, hunting, and crafting instead of just hoarding. But even with resources managed, people make fatal social mistakes. Even if you somehow maintain your resources perfectly, the next mistake would destroy you from within your own group. But the resource degradation problem goes even deeper into stuff you'd never think about. Rubber rots. Every seal, gasket, hose, and tire becomes brittle and useless within a year or two. Your gas mask? The rubber seal fails and you're breathing spores or airborne pathogens. Your water filtration system? The O-rings crack and now you're drinking contaminated water without knowing it. Shoes fall apart, leaving you barefoot in a world of broken glass and infected blood. Even bullets degrade. The primers corrode, the powder absorbs moisture, and suddenly your gun goes click instead of bang when you need it most. And forget about electronics completely. Capacitors fail, circuits corrode, and electromagnetic pulses from infrastructure collapse could fry anything solid state anyway. The comfortable modern world isn't just gone, it's actively disintegrating around you, and every day makes the tools you're counting on less reliable until you're basically living in the Stone Age with a zombie problem. Instant trust. The Walking Dead starts with Rick joining groups, and survivors in most zombie media quickly form alliances. World War Z shows humanity coming together, and The Last of Us has Joel partnering with Ellie almost immediately. But real disasters reveal that strangers are dangerous until proven otherwise. Resource scarcity drives people to rob and kill for survival advantages. The Walking Dead's later seasons prove this with the Saviors, Whisperers, and endless hostile groups. Betrayal plots in Army of the Dead show how greed destroys cooperation. The Last of Us bandits ambush travelers routinely because desperation erases morality. Without background checks or quarantine protocols, you invite infection and violence into your safe zone. Strip searches and isolation periods for newcomers are essential. As 28 weeks later demonstrates, when ignored, protocols restart the outbreak. Trauma from having to euthanize infected loved ones would break most people psychologically. Keep groups small with vetted members, or stay solo in rural areas if you can't trust anyone. This means having strict entry policies and being willing to turn people away, which most shows portray as villainous, but is actually smart survival. And the final big mistake ties everything together. And this brings us to the ultimate misconception that ties everything together and reveals why most survival plans are doomed from the start: combat focus. Zombie media is packed with fight scenes. Resident Evil features non-stop action. Left 4 Dead is pure combat, and The Walking Dead survivors fight through walker hordes constantly. But fighting should be your absolute last resort. Every engagement risks injury, infection, and attracting more threats through noise. Escape and evasion are way smarter than standing your ground. The Walking Dead characters who survive longest, like Daryl, pick their battles carefully. World War Z's initial chaos shows how fighting crowds gets you killed. 28 days later, survivors run and hide more than they fight because they're not action heroes. Stealth tactics like moving at night, using distractions, and avoiding populated areas keep you alive longer than any weapon. Fortification beats confrontation every time, letting threats pass by instead of engaging them directly. Train to avoid zombies, not kill them, because the best fight is the one you never have. This mindset shift turns you from a warrior into a survivor who actually sees long-term success. If you enjoyed this video and want to see everything people get wrong about zombie apocalypse survival, click the video on the screen.